No.
It's each chip.
Each chip
$1.
is $1, 2, 3.
So you have $3,
13.
5, 10, 13. $13. 5, 10, 13. And you get one green chip, which is $10.
Well, being right next door to a saloon, I can just imagine what this room was used for.
I already got my green. You get one black one.
One black one.
Which is $20.
Not next door, but part of.
I got 53 plus.
Everybody.
Probably not for long.
Okay, so I have 3. So 13. 1, 2, 3.
How much are they?
Each is 10, 43. Each are $43.
Okay, anyway, $3. You have to pay to play, so you gotta put in one white chip to play.
Okay. This is
Now you're gonna get 5 cards, and the way to win is you can get 3 of the same kind. So like 3, 3, 3 is the best, and then it goes 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, and up until you get to
Hi.
the ace.
Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
And then you can get like 8. Then you can get 1, 2, 3, or ace 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, anything like that. Or you can just lie. You don't have to show your pricing. But anyways, after we go around, we all have to bid. If you say, so if I were to start out, I have to put in another white one, and then I can put in one of these ones, or I can just put in this white one. But you have, Lily would have to match what I do. So if I put in a green one, and then put in a green one.
put like in any other color.
If I put in a white one and then put in a green one,
Again, please?
So I've heard that this saloon was actually constructed for a movie, and the guy who was in charge of this area, this town at the time, said that they could build a saloon for their use in the movie if they build an exact copy of the Criterion Hall that was here originally, that was burned down before. And so the movie built this whole place. They looked at all the photos and got all the measurements they could, and basically built a copy of the original saloon. So this is
I'll be darned.
actually pretty authentic.
Do you know what the movie was that they built this
I don't remember.
to be the set for? Okay. Probably a Western, huh?
Well, it would have to be.
Yes.
Certainly not Dirty Harry.
no, you have to lay down 2 as trash cards.
Thank you.
Determination as to what is next. From the first year to which my memory stretches, I have been a disappointed woman. When, with my brothers, I reached forth after the sources of knowledge, I was reproved with, "It isn't fit for you. It doesn't belong to women." Then there was but one college in the world where women were admitted, and that was in Brazil. I would have found my way there, but by the time I was prepared to go, one was opening in the young state of Ohio. The first in the United States where women could enjoy opportunities with men. I was disappointed when I came to seek a profession worthy of a mortal being. Every employment was closed to me, except those of teacher, the seamstress, and the housekeeper.
Don't worry, Japanese version.
In education, in marriage, in religion, in everything, disappointment is the lot of women. It shall be the business of my life to deepen this disappointment in every woman's heart until she bows down to it no longer.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing equally as well.
You having a pair of custom-made boots?
He is doing a fitting for me. So.
Really? Well, that is neat.
I am doing this, but I can answer questions if you have.
Oh, I'm happy to just watch and listen.
Oh, okay.
And of course, throw in a question if it arises.
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Alrighty.
So these guys on the wall here, for the soles, are they stamps for the leather?
Yeah, there for a while you were using what's called a lip knife. You'd put, rough cut a square of leather out and put it on the bottom of your boot, and then you'd grab that lip knife and cut it out. Well, when the industrial age started, if you will, in the late 1800s, they come up with these. So if you're doing 10 pair of boots a day, you didn't have to, cut around there. Because that leather, when it's dried,
Yeah.
you are not going to be cutting very easily.
It's like a board.
Yeah, and that's not the thickest soling leather you can get.
God.
It's like a chunk of wood.
Yeah. So yeah.
Heftiest scissors aren't going through that.
So you can still cut.
Yeah.
Take your time and cut and get everything done. But when they came out with those, it was just much easier.
Good.
Much easier.
Yeah.
So.
Now, how does that work? Do you like put that in a press and it cuts its way through the leather? Or use it as a pattern?
No. You can use a press or you can use a hammer. And those little ones up there for like the heels and that little tiny one up there, just a large handheld sledge.
So it's just pressing through the leather instead of having to cut.
They do make handheld or hand presses. Basically, all that is with a system of gears and a large handle. You put your leather down, and that's what the big round piece on top is. You have basically it's not hydraulic, but a post on top of that with a post that sits right on it, and then you just grab that large hammer. Yeah.
So I imagine a shoemaker probably spent a fair amount of time keeping those things sharp, huh?
Sharp is good, or you could go over to the blacksmith and he could use his grinding stones. But if you every time you use them, if you looked at them and made sure that they were no nicks, no cuts, no nothing in there, and had a little hand file and just touched them up every time you used them, 5 minutes of prevention is a lot better than 30 minutes of heartache down the road. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, like I said, more of the industrial age. Earlier on, they would use, excuse me a minute, they would, once you cut it out, rough shape with something like this, then you would go along, once it's attached to the boot, and you would use something like this, and this is called a lip knife because it's got a little lip on it.
Okay.
And for a basic demonstration, what you would do, this lip prevents you from cutting into the leather of the upper. So what you would do is you would just go along and trim like so.
Right.
And when you did that, you would wet that leather.
Okay.
Because wet leather, and I have a piece here that I can show you a little bit. Don't let my wife see that. But wet leather is a little easier to cut around and take a big chunk off than is, well, this ain't a good example. let's grab this piece here. This is a piece of soling leather, and you can feel that.
Oh, God. Yeah.
That's what I would use to put on
Yeah,
the bottom of
didn't
the
even
boot.
bend.
You know, to get in here and
Good chance of
Okay.
slipping and causing problems.
You made your point.
but my point being,
Yeah, I don't
so
want
what
you
I
to-
would do is I would wet that, and what that's called is called mulling.
Mulling.
Mulling, M-U-L-L-I-N-G.
Uh-huh.
And you would wet that leather, and then you'd take it out and you'd set it on some newspaper and cover it and let it dry for a little bit. And basically what you're doing is letting all that moisture get all the way through the leather.
Okay.
And actually, once it's there, it starts to dry, because the wet leather looks like this.
Right.
It's dark. When it starts to dry, you get that lighter leather hue back, and then at that point in time, you know your leather is completely wet all the way through, so you can stitch it by hand, you can cut it by hand, you can peg it using these wooden pegs by hand, you can do all of that. You don't have a lot of time, because on a day like today, if I was to wet and mull that, put it on my boot, by the time I sewed about this much, that piece would be
It'd
dry.
be dry.
So I would have to dunk it in a bucket of water again, or grab a wet sponge and make sure it stays wet. That's if I have no interruptions. If I have no interruptions, and nothing towards you, sir. If I have no interruptions, this boot right here to hand sew
Yeah.
would take roughly 45 minutes to 1 hour.
Huh.
Okay.
What are these pegs used for?
Those are the wooden pegs. Along about the 1860s, a few things changed once again because of industrial age. These wooden pegs are used to attach
Okay.
the soles
The heel and the...
and even the front part.
Oh, that too. Yeah, I see.
Okay, that's a brand new one, never been worn.
Huh.
That's a used one, and you can see those wooden pegs.
You sure can. Huh.
Now, when people in time wanted fancy, then they started coming up with stitching, like I have here. And the bad part with stitching is it's very good, and it looks nice when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
But when you wear through these stitches, you've weakened that bond. Okay, even if you use a shoemaker stitch, which is a double stitch, you weaken that bond. With wooden pegs, you do not weaken anything, because those pegs are getting ground off, not cut in half.
Sure.
So
That
by the
makes
time
sense.
you get down to needing a repair, you still have wooden pegs in there holding that piece on. They may not be very long, but I have repaired boots that have been older than 20 years old, that the pegs were still in there, and I had to cut the pegs to get to the sole off.
Was an adhesive used?
Yes.
What kind of adhesive was available in those?
It
back in the day?
basically it was either a bone glue or a hide glue. Those were the two early adhesives. And to explain that a little bit more, piano makers, violin makers use the same glue. And what it is you have your cow, they get slaughtered, the meat goes there, the hide goes over here to the tannery, and then everything else, entrails no, but everything else of the animal comes over to this building, and what they do is they just boil it down with some ingredients mixed in to make sure everything gets separated. And what you're looking for is the collagen in the bones, in the ears,
Sure.
in everything. And once all of it gets boiled down, basically you're making stew. Okay? You're wanting everything to be boiled off. And then you separate all the solids from all the waste, if there's any left. And that liquid is what you're looking for. And then you even separate it even farther. You let it cool, just like milk will separate when it cools.
Yeah.
Then you take the stuff off the top and set it aside, and the bottom and set it aside. And what's left over is basically collagen, with a few ingredients added to preserve. And when you're done and it's all dry, then people like myself and the cabinet makers and the piano makers, they will order some, and it will come in crystal form. And then I don't have one here, they're very hard to come by. A little stove that's about this tall, and it's got a little light candle underneath, that's all. And then it comes up, and then you have a pot on top, and you put those crystals in there, and just the heat from that candle will melt the crystals. And when you need to use it, you use it and clamp it together. It's not as easy to use as current everyday adhesives, but you clamp it together or put pressure on it and set it aside, and when it is fully dry, it is dry. And then from there, then you can use the wooden pegs
I see.
and further the bond.
I should let you get back to your customer.
Okay. I don't mean
Thank
to
you very much
push
for your
you out.
time, though.
No
No,
problem.
not at all.
You are why we're here, so thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in and enjoying our
Thank you, too.
time.
Happy boots.
Yeah.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Pardon me.